Hello there, Inky Fingers here, and I'll be painting a line and wash. Now what I want to try out is to see how well the pen goes on the paper, and of course because mixed media paper isn't watercolour paper, I want to see how well the washes actually go onto this paper. So this should be quite interesting. So stick around and we'll see what happens. Now this is the paper I'm going to do this piece on. See, it's a Winsor & Newton mixed media. It's slightly grained. It's A4, 135 pounds, so it is rather thick. Now if we look at the paper itself, we can see that it is ever so slightly grained. There, we can see it there. It's white, and on the facing side it tells us that we can experiment with different media. This paper was specially selected for combining mixed media, and we're going to use ink and put watercolour washes on it, so it'll be interesting to see how it fares. Now the picture I'm going to paint is this rather nice little scene, an unusual angle, but I quite like the way you're looking up at the houses. Now this is a scene here in Hartlepool of the headland, and these houses here are pretty much they are the most photographed and painted houses on the entire headland, and they've been that way for countless years. And they're in front of the old ancient Hartlepool defensive wall. We've got the beach here, or in this case mostly rocks, with some breakwater concrete areas here. Now I have already drawn it out. I don't need to show you the drawing because I have done a previous video on exactly how I would draw a scene like this, measuring, etc. Now I'm going to start this piece by inking the scene out, as it's already drawn out in pencil. All I need to do is to put the ink over the lines, and then we'll put the watercolour washes and build up the picture and see what it looks like. The watercolour washes look like on this not watercolour paper. Now the one thing I have changed in this picture is that if we look at the photograph, we have this breakwater divider there, and we have another one just in front of it. I haven't put the second one in because I couldn't see much point, so we've just got the one here, and this will be just basically sand. Now the pen I'm going to be using for this piece is, I've chosen this unbranded sub £10 Fude nibbed fountain pen. It's got quite a fine nib on it, and the ink that's in this is what I always use for fountain pens, the Liquitex Professional Carbon Black. Now the good thing about using a Fude pen is that of course we can use it as it's intended and get a nice wide line, or we can use it the opposite way and get a thin line. So it's not a one-trick pony. So some of these lines I'll be using it in the ways I've just shown you. For example, these areas here, I can use it upside down, which you will get a nice thin line. Like so. We can even get nice delicate chimney pots. And we just go over the entire thing Now, one thing with fountain pens, or some fountain pens, remember this is just a very inexpensive pen, is that yes, they do work when you put them upside down like so, but sometimes they do sort of dry up a little bit, like it is now. And you've got to work at it a little bit. More expensive pens, you know, they don't really do this. They can, of course, but usually you find that they don't. Now, once we've got the pencil working, it's quite a nice experience to do the pen work, because all the hard work is done. We are just inking in the lines we've already drawn in. But now we've got the lines in, the pencil lines, if you want, you can experiment a bit and maybe make some lines a little bit darker, a little bit wider, or a bit looser, depending how loose or expressionistic you want the picture. Now, this paper, of course, is, as we saw, it does have a little bit of a grain, but it is really, well, it's mixed media paper, but it just doesn't have the grain of a standard, like, not surfaced watercolour paper. So the pen glides over much easier than it would on even a not or a medium grained watercolour paper. So you don't really get that sort of the expression of the pen sort of skipping over, say if it was rough paper. When you do fountain pen over like rough paper, especially if it's cotton rag, then you get the pen sort of skips and jumps slightly, and you get a far more expressive line. Well, on this paper, you don't get that. So it's something you've just got to take into consideration if you're going to use a mixed media paper. Now, this is where the upside down application of the pen really comes in handy when you're doing these fine details such as windows. Now, as you can see, that I'm just basically zipping through this inking in stage, as you can see, I'm just really just going over my pencil lines. But even though this, I suppose it looks like a complicated subject, because we do have perspective going down in both ways, going down here and then this going down here to this vanishing point, which will be over here somewhere. When I actually drew this, it actually only took about 20 minutes to draw. Why did it only take about 20 minutes to draw? It's because I used the proportional scale divider to do it. And if you've watched the previous video, about maybe 3 videos back, when I showed you actually how to draw buildings using just basically looking at them as shapes, because like take for example this window I'm drawing now. That's not a window, that's a rectangle. It only becomes a window later on. At this present moment in time, it's just a bog basic shape. But I showed you on that video using the proportional scale divider, and how you can even get like perspective quite easily, quite accurate perspective quite easily. And once you get the hang of using some proportional scale dividers, really the world is your oyster. You can get so much more confidence in what you're doing. And proportional scale dividers, of course, are the one that I was using. They only cost maybe it's £4, £5, £6, depends on where you go. You can get them on Amazon, you can get them on eBay, usually from China, so you might have a little wait. But it's worth the wait, and it's definitely worth the purchase. Now you may be able to see I've got a lot of pencil lines shown still, especially the reference lines. You might just see it around here. This is the cross. Or if you go back to the photograph, as I said, I used the proportional scale dividers. You always have a reference cross, so you can go by the central point here and then just get the measurements using the proportional scale dividers of where everything is. That point to that point, there's the end of that building. From that point to that point, there's the end of that building. From point 8, and it goes on. Same as the height. From that point to that point, you make a little cross or an X or a little dot. You put it there. You've just made the measurement of this to this wall here. So you then use that line and just measure using the dividers from there to there. Put a mark, a little point. So you've got a point there, which is a little bit higher than a point there because it's perspective. So all you need to do then is just join that dot to that dot, and you've got virtually perfect perspective. You do that with that, do it with all, and you get perspective going down. Now you would do the same with the bottom if you could see the bottom, but of course this wall's in the way, so it makes it slightly easier for us. But that's how you can get really good easy perspective by using a proportional scale divider. But once all of the pencil work is drawn in, the pen work is drawn in, I shall simply get a rubber and rub it all out. Now the quite rocky shoreline here, you don't have to be too neat because it's just going to be like rocks and pebbles and whatnot, stones. So I'll try to be loose. I'll turn the pen over so we got the full food nib again. That might be a bit better to actually get some thick, juicy rocks in this area, because of course it is closer to us. So we get some larger rocks there, and then we go back to the smaller, thinner, upside down area. Now the problem is how many pebbles and stones do you put in? Because it is quite a sort of a shingly type area of the beach. And we'll make the paint, hopefully the watercolour washes sort of fill the area out. Remember, this is not watercolour paper, it's mixed media paper, so the paint should go on reasonably well, but it's not going to behave like watercolour paint. And here we have the picture all inked in. Now if we just compare it to the reference material, that's not too bad at all. It's nice and bold. The paint should go over this very nicely, but all we need to do to finish this part of the picture off, or part of the process, is now to get the eraser, and if you're going to rub something out, you get this big bit of nugget and you go to town on it. Now, of course, the ink is totally dry, it has to be dry. otherwise you'll be in trouble. And there we go. One fully inked up scene ready for watercolour painting. Now for the next part of the process is the watercolour washes. Now, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, this is not watercolour paper. This is mixed media paper. So it hasn't got the tooth of watercolour paper, so it's going to be much more washy. This is on a little bit of an angle, so we'll see just how this paint runs down the paper. So we've got to be careful here. And I'm going to start with the sky, and the sky is just simply some cobalt blue and just the tiniest bit of permanent alizarin crimson. It's just gonna take that harshness off the blue. And as this is quite a busy scene and it's only a tiny little bit of sky, we cannot put clouds in the sky. If we do put clouds in, then it's going to be too busy because all the busyness is down here. So I'm just going to do a flat wash. You can see how it's running down just like hot press actually. And we'll see how greasy this paper actually is, if it's greasy at all actually. And I'm going to go down to there, and then I'm just going to put some more water, clean water, in the wash to dampen it down a bit, or to dampen it down, to dilute it down I should say. And I'm just going to go across and be very careful to try and go around the brickwork and the roofs. We don't have masking fluid on to sort of give us a safety net. And we've got to be quick because it is very warm in this room. And we don't want it to dry on us and get a hard line. So nearly, very nearly. Just dab the brush off and then just suck up any stray bits of paint. Now I don't particularly want this. I'm going to try and not make this picture really vivid. I want it to be of more of a subdued colour. So that's worked out alright. We'll just let that dry and we're going to something else. Now the next part I'm going to do paint, because the sky is a bit wet still. I'm going to paint in the wall, the old defensive wall. Now that we can see it's more like a raw sienna yellow ochre type mix. So I've just mixed some raw sienna, just a touch of yellow ochre, because yellow ochre is quite a prominent colour. So I've just got this type of colour, and I probably will intermix it as we go along with perhaps a little bit of yellow just to brighten it up a tad, maybe a little bit of burnt sienna in here just around, just to give this variation of the colour. So I'm going to I'll start down here and then just go across. We can go over this bit. This part here has got a little bit of burnt sienna in, so as we're going across here to this area, it's getting a little bit lighter, so I'm just going to put a touch, I'm going to try a little bit of azo yellow light. This is a Rembrandt colour, just to change it. Now we can see here That's a little bit of grease on the paper. Perhaps that's from my hand, I'm not too sure. That's that. Now I'm going to put a little bit of burnt sienna into the mix, and I'm just going to round here. Could do with a smaller brush, but and I'm just going to dab around here because this definitely has got a more of a burnt sienna type colour. And while I've got the mix, I'm going to just put a little bit here and there. As it's drying, we can see it's starting to dry here. Might be a little bit too wet elsewhere, but I'm just going to dab it in here and there. Just to try, see it's very dry there. Just to try and make it look like there's different coloured stones. So we're not really going to put detail as such into this wall. As we can see in the picture, there is lots of brickwork, stonework. We probably put a couple of stones in. Now look, it's really drying quickly now. A couple of stones with a very fine tipped pen at the end, just to give the impression that it's a old stone wall. Now I'm going to put a little bit of this blue into that mix. You see it just dirties it up ever so slightly, and I think we'll put a little bit more, and I'll put a bit of fresh blue. There we go. That darkens it up to more of a mucky browny grey. And then I'm just going to dab it in across here, because the tide does actually go right up to this point. I'll put a little bit of this colour just on the top of the wall. Now again, I'm just trying to give some little bits of variations of colour at this stage. It'll make our job easier later on when we decide what detail we're actually going to put in. We'll let the tonal value, or the colours and the tonal values actually make the wall. As we can see, it does look like there's different bits of wall in there. A little bit like I did with the I think my last video of painting brickwork. The easy way to paint brickwork without actually painting any bricks. This is just the same, but it's just a stone. Now I'm going to leave that there, so I don't want to overwork it at this point, and I'll start putting this. This is going to be, well, it's not really a beach as such. There is a bit of sand there, but it's like more shaly. So what I'm going to do, I'm mixing up the same colour, raw sienna, bit of yellow ochre, just to give this sort of colour, and I'm going to just paint it in. Now you can see how I'm doing, well, when I'm doing this, how smooth it is. It just the paint just glides across the paper just like hot press. And I'm not keen on hot press paper. I like to have tooth, but for something like this, a pad of this paper, if you go out on location, I've just put a bit of the azo yellow light again, just as I did in this wall, just to make it look a little bit more sunshiny. But if you took a pad of this paper out, because I only paid about £7 something for the pad, and use that to do your sketches or just have a bit of fun while you're out. I've just put a little bit more raw sienna into this mix now, just to change it again. It's a lot, well, taking the pad out, instead of like watercolour paper, you could get some really nice simple sketches done without basically breaking the bank. I've put a little bit more yellow ochre just to show maybe a little bit of sunlight coming on this part of the beach. And I really don't want to mess around with this too much, but I'm happy with that. That will do. We'll put a few more other washes on when it's dry. Now we've got that. I don't want to do this because I might put my hand, well, probably will put my hand in. I don't want to do this yet, so we'll continue on. Let's move that up a bit. We'll continue on to this foreground, all the rocks. Now looking at this, the photograph, the reference material, see this is more, it's more brown. Do we want to put this as that brown? We'll see. But we don't want it this colour because it's not sand. So I think as we've got this colour here, which is just the darker colour I put into the wall, we'll give this a go. And I'll just put this in like so, which is actually not too bad a colour. It looks quite similar to what's on the reference photograph. Don't you love it when a plant turns out well? So now I'm going to go into maybe it's a little bit of viridian. Look at that, that's a bit in your face. A little bit of yellow ochre. So still, viridian is the best green on your palette. It's the best mixer on your palette. I think I've put some of this in. This, I can't remember what this green's called, but it's just a cheap Van Gogh. I think it's a Van Gogh brand. It's one of their granulating colours. Don't use it much, but it is handy for some things. So I'll just put a little bit of green, like it's seaweed, a bit of moss or whatever. Again, don't want to go too far. That'll do, I think. I'll just take some yellow ochre, put it in there. Now this is pretty much neat yellow ochre, but of course the brush is dirty from this mix, so it's not as bright as it normally would. And I'm just now going to here and there put a little bit of this yellow ochre here and there. So we've got to, because we've got the yellow ochre in here, we've got the yellow ochre there, we've got to continue with the yellow ochre in this part of the picture. Keep the colour harmony going. And something like that will do. We will go over this again with some darks and to get some texture in. I might even at the end cover this bit up and do a little bit of splattering just to give a bit of extra texture. Splattering, my favourite technique. So now all this is done, we'll have to let that fully dry now. Right, now everything's dry. Didn't take too long because of the heat of the day. Now it's time to do the washes for the buildings. Now the buildings, as we can see, this one thing about these houses, they are different coloured buildings. Now this photograph was taken years ago, so I think they're all different colours now. But we got some nice light blues, some sort of pale yellows and whatnot, and we got some nice terracotta type red roofs. So I'm going to start with the roofs first, and the colours I've mixed for these red roofs is I've mixed in a little bit of cadmium red. I put a tiniest bit of Pyrrole red. This is a Daniel Smith colour, and I've put some azo yellow medium in with that, just to make it a bit more orangey. And then it was a little bit too bright, so the colour I've got here, which I've mixed in the wall there, I've just put a little bit of that into there, because this is more of an orangey colour. This is more of a sort of a bluish colour, blue and orange complementary colours. So this, a tiny bit of this into that will just subdue it, will knock it back a bit so it's not as in your face. And this is the colour I'm going to use for the roofs. So I'm going to start off with this roof here. Now you may notice that I'm not bothering about any reflections. I'm not bothering about any shadows, because even though the sun is coming from this angle here, so everything on the left hand side will be in shadow. So all of this building will be in shadow. Doesn't matter, because I shall be applying a shadow colour over the washes at the end. We've got to make sure that this doesn't blob up like this, because it's such a smooth paper. Even though it does has a touch of grain, as we've seen, it is pretty smooth. I'm not going to put any other colour in this because they are pretty, we'll just get that before it dries, because they are pretty neat in colour. I'm looking at this. That house is brown, so we don't want to do the wrong houses, the wrong colours. So this roof is red, and this roof is red. Well, the brush I'm using, by the way, is a number 7 round Kolinsky Sable, Winsor & Newton. Very nice brush. So that's these roofs. These two roofs are more of a brown. So I'm just going to use burnt umber. Let's be lazy. Normally I'll probably mix my own browns, but in this case I'm just going to mix some burnt umber. But burnt umber it's a horrible colour. It's completely unnatural, and we need to darken that down a bit. So how do we darken that down? We can add a little bit of blue. In this case, some French ultramarine. Just a tiny bit. There you go. We can see just how it knocks it down. Oop, there we go, too much. Or maybe it's not. No, that's quite a nice dark brown. And in this, I'm then just going to paint in these two other roofs, like so. And that's that. For the houses themselves, as I've said, they're different colours, but we have a little problem because these colours here are very, very light, and I don't actually have the colours paint to actually mimic these colours. So the closest I'll get here is by using manganese blue, which is a very light blue, but it's still going to be a bit too dark. So what I'm going to do is to put a little bit of white ink into the manganese blue mix, and that's going to lighten it up, so I should get something like that colour. So what I meant about the manganese, this is manganese. It's a very light blue. It's a colour I use instead of cerulean. I prefer manganese. But you can see this is far too light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get, this is a little pot of white ink, and I'm just going to apply the ink, and we can see magically it starts to go just the right colour. Now this colour is more, looking at the picture, it's going to be more suitable for this house. As we can see, it's a bit more that house. This now looks very much like it's more violety. It's much warmer. So I'll use this colour for this house, and I'll warm it up a tad for this house. So it's just going to be a flat wash with this colour. Just slap the colour on. We're not going to really have any of the colour in this, apart from maybe a shadow or two. And that is that house there. Now for this house, as I've said, it wants to be a little bit cooler. So I'm going to get my other palette out, and I'm going to try sticking some lavender. A colour I virtually never use, but it can be handy in certain situations. So I'm just going to put some lavender in this, and it looks like it's going. It just so happens to go to that colour wheel. We'll have a look. That's the colour we're after. That's the colour we've got. Now that is not too bad. Maybe it's a touch more lavender and a little bit of water just to dilute it. Want some more water, so I'm just going to drop some water actually onto the paint, because it is too dark. Now we're getting a very dangerous blob there, so I'm just going to dab it out, and so I'll just paint this in. Now this part of the house is of course on the left hand side, and it's as you've seen, the sunlight's coming from this direction, so this will have a whopping great shadow colour on. And that's that building done. So the only thing we've got to do to now complete to fill in the entire picture, we haven't put other bits of details in yet, but it's this colour here. Now this is going to be the nice thing to do, because it's very sort of this gorgeous sort of mossy seaweedy green with darker areas of green mottled around it. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a couple of greens. We have this green here, which is actually a lovely green. This is it's a granulating green. It's one of Rose's granulating colours, but in reality it's not that granulating. Even on like rough paper, it doesn't really granulate at all. So on this smooth paper, not a chance. But that is a very, very pleasant green, which will look lovely as the base colour. So I think I might just put a little bit of yellow in there. Azo yellow light, just to lighten it up a little bit. And then all we need to do is just go wild, go right across. Now as I'm going to go down, I think I'll stick, we've got this other green here. Actually it's not green, it's actually called, I think, dusk yellow, but it's very greeny. And in this darker, I'm just going to put this down here. There's of course the sea does come up to pretty much it covers most of this, the height of the sea when the tide comes in. And I'm just going to put this here while it's still wet. It's drying very quickly, so we've got this sort of tide effect. And I'm just going to take that off there so it doesn't run down into the foreground. And then I'm going to go back into the original green and then just sort of dab it in and try and let it do its own thing. But as you can see, it's smooth paper, the border's on a nice angle, it does sort of run. But if I can get some of these like little marks, which happen naturally, that's okay. Now back into this dusk yellow. And now this is now a thicker mix, because it's got to be a thicker mix if you put it on an underwash. And I'm just going to see if I can just mottle it in a little bit just by dabbing it. I just want to try and get it nice and this dark mottled green. It is little, really, I think it's running in a little bit too much because of the smoothness of the paper, but again, it's smooth paper, it's not watercolour paper. You've got to accept that these things will happen. But as I said earlier on, it's a cheap pad. It's a good quality pad, but it's quite inexpensive, really. Right, I might even put some splattering over this bit later on. But this is going to have a swarthy colour on because it is sort of facing away from the sun. And that's now pretty much all of the picture has got colour on. So we'll let that dry and then we'll start going over it with some other colours to get a little bit of modelling and tonal work in. Right, so we're all dry again. Now to put some modelling in. So we're going to start with the beach. I'm just going to put a few streaks, not much, just to give like something that's some tonal variations in the beach. And it's just going to be a darker version really of that, the colour we've already got on. So I'm just going to take some raw sienna, so that's a darker colour, we'll try that. And I'm just going to sort of, that might be a little bit too light still, so a bit darker. And I'm just going to, from the wall, down at an angle so it shows the beach is coming down on like maybe a slope that way. Give a bit of shape to the beach. This might be too big a brush, but I don't really like those hard lines on this smooth paper, so I'll dab it with my finger just to at least give it a little bit of like roughness. Now on rough paper, of course, this would dry brush up beautifully, give a really nice effect. It's smooth paper, so we've got to just take what we can get. And I think I will just haven't cleaned the brush, I'm just going into that green mix and I'll stick a little bit of the green just so it looks like we've got some, basically where the tide goes on the wall here, because this wall does actually have seaweed and moss on the wall, like so. We'll stick a little little bit here and there, just along, and then continuing up on the wall we need a little bit of, again, some more tonal variations on the wall. Again, if we look at the photograph, we can see that especially down here there is some much sort of more weathered bits, darker bits, so we'll just stick some of these in. Now we've got this sort of brownie colour we mixed earlier on, so I'll just re-wet that and see what that's going to do. It might be a bit light, but you never, oh no, it's not too bad. So we'll put some of this down here. Again, we'll try to dirty that up a little bit. Now we can just make it a little bit softer by, say, we put some darker up here. Now we've got hard edges there, so what we can do is get a small brush, dip it in some clean water, and then just dab it on, and then just pull it around a bit, exactly like I did in, I think, the last video when I was painting brickwork without painting bricks. This is how you can get some really nice textural details. So blob it on, dip the brush in the clean water, and then just dab the water on, and then tip of the brush, just pull it around. So we got darker areas, some more dilute areas, right? And we get a nice sort of textured wall using colour and tone. We put a bit down here, right? So we've got some there. Brush in the water, drop it on. You may have seen, I'm not sure if you could see it on a camera, but a lot of water just dropped onto this wet paint, and now I'm just going to pull that water around with the tip of the small brush and just make it into more of a stain. There's a touch too much water there, so I'm just going to dab that bit out. Now that being using that colour, now I'm going to use, I'll go into this colour, and I shall just put a little bit. Now we can see how much stronger this is. Ooh, it's strong. But it doesn't matter, because again, you just dip the brush in the water, drop it on, and then just pull it around and it'll just naturally dilute. So that is all around here, that is much more burnt sienna-ish. Not much burnt sienna in these walls, but we can, it's my wall and I'll do what I like with it. So I'm just going to stick a little bit of colour here in the clean water, drop it on, so it's more like just a stain. Now look at this, if you can see here, just there's a big negative block. So that could be a block, one of these big heavy sandstone type blocks, that bits of stone that this wall, which I think is from something like, I think, the 13th century, is made from. See, there's another one. Exactly what I did in the last video. So if you haven't seen the last video about how to paint brickwork without painting bricks, have a watch of it, because this is exactly what I did with that video. Now you can see how interesting this looks compared to, say, this side. So I'll do the same thing. Ooh, it's a bit much. Still a bit damp there. Never mind. So we'll just a little bit of colour here. not too much water on the brush now because it is already a bit damp. And there we go. See that? There's another big block of stone. There's another one. They just naturally happen. Happy accidents. Now there's some really strong colour, so this will really show it. So we got that there. Drop in, just pull it around. There's a negative brick. There's a negative brick. Just pull it around now so it's not, so we don't have a just one blob of colour just, you know, just solid on. I'll leave that bit because that bit is going away from us. So the next thing to do is we've got all these really annoying white areas called windows. Now they are only tiny, so and they do have white, quite delicate white window frames, so they've got to be dark. So I'm just going to, normally I would maybe put them slightly bluey, a bluey black, but I think maybe I'll have to put them more as a quite a blackish colour, just to make sure that the fine window frames are going to show up on them. So all I'm going to do there, I'm going to put some ultramarine blue, French ultramarine blue. Ooh, that's not dark. And I'm going to put some, well, I can put some, what's that colour? This is some, it's not Payne's grey, it is oxide black. Oxide black because it's a very heavily granulating colour normally on normal paper, but this isn't normal paper. So all I want, so I'm going to do this. As for quickness, I should have put the black first and then the blue. And we want to quite put some more. Put some more blue in there. So we've got this quite bluey black colour. And then using our small brush again, all I'm going to do, I don't have to look at the photograph because I'm just going to paint in these dark windows. So that's now the windows put in. Gets rid of that awkward white. So they're quite dark. Hopefully the window frames will show up quite nice on this darkness. So what I'll do is I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll mix up a nice big shadow colour, and then we'll stick in all of the big washes for all of the shadows to really make this pop. Now for the shadow colour, I've transferred it into a larger receptacle so we don't want to run out. And again, this is just oxide black and French ultramarine. It's just going to give a nice dark colour. Now if you look at the picture, we can see that everything on the left hand side is in shadow. All of this is in shadow. All the things, these ballast things that are jutting out from the wall, the left hand side is in shadow. So we'll soon see just what this colour is like. Is it too dark? Is it too light? I don't know. So what we're going to do is simply paint over everything that's in the left hand side. Even this bit here, which this is now going to cast a shadow on the wall. Maybe this brush is a tad too big for this. You're going to get some shadows under the eaves here. You've got the shadow under the eaves. Around here we've got that is away from the sun, so you're going to have some sort of shading there. Right, I'm going to change brushes to a small brush for these bits of the wall here. Now this really will have a shadow jutting out of there. That will have some sort of shadow jutting out of there, and that's going to have some sort of shadow jutting out of there. Change back to the big brush for this scary bit here, so make sure this paint is really mixed up well, and be brave. I'm going to put another wash on here. Just let it run down. Yep, just go over the ground a little bit. Oh, I just feel like I want to put a few little bits more bits and bobs here, but I know I'm just going to overwork it a bit. Something like that, just to give it see what that's like. There we can see it just gives this lovely little bit of texture. Simplest thing, but it gives it a really nice sort of effect. Now just to finish off the picture, a couple of little bits and bobs. Firstly, we need to put our little window frames in. Now you could use a very small brush with some white ink like I used here, or you could use a very fine steel nib pen, dipping pen in the white ink, or you could use something like this. This is a sort of Uniblog Signo white pen. It's a rollerball, so it's very fine, so we'll see what this is like. So all we really need is to just quickly outline these. It doesn't have to be anything much. Now that's the window frames in. It just sort of finishes off the buildings. Now the very last thing we need to do is to use an extremely fine pen, and I'm just going to use my Rotring 2000 Isograph with the 0.18 nib because it is extraordinarily fine, and I'm just going to put in I'm just going to draw in some little bricks here and there, or stones in this case. Now we're just going to have a little bit of doodling just with this pen, just on some of the things we've already put in. Maybe it's just a hint of a few tiles. we don't want too many. That's the finished picture with a nice clean border. As I've said, it's not watercolour paper, it's just mixed media paper. But how does it perform? If you look up closely, that performs very well with watercolour. It's had a few washes on, and it's quite good. The pen has gone on it absolutely brilliantly, as it would, because it's smooth. But the watercolour itself has gone on fantastically. So I would definitely say that if you're going to go out of doors in the field and do pen and ink or line and wash, pen and wash, whatever you want to call it, but do work of this nature outside, then instead of perhaps taking more expensive watercolour paper, you can take a bulk of mixed media paper of a decent brand and use that instead, and you can see that it gives a really nice end result. Well, that's the picture done. What did I think of the paper? Actually, I thought it was very good. The pen goes on extremely well, which obviously it would be because it's just a smoothish grained paper. But the watercolour washes, they went on a lot better than I thought. The watercolour still retained quite a nice colour saturation. It didn't just soak into the paper and become really dull like it could very well do on other paper. And as I paid about £7 for this pad, A4 in size, and had 30 sheets, I think that's absolutely brilliant value for money. And I think it's a really good book, really good paper for taking out into the field just to mess around with outside. Now, if you enjoyed this little demonstration, you'd like to see more, then please subscribe if you haven't, put a comment in the comments, as it really helps the channel, and I'll see you next time. So until then, goodbye.